My name is Mark Wolfe. I'm the producer of The Orchard, which is my partner's and my first dark drama feature film. It was released in 2022 to limited local theatrical in Creston, British Columbia, where the film was shot, and then later shown in nearby Nelson, British Columbia, itself no stranger to film production. It's where the Steve Martin and Daryl Hannah hit film ROXANNE was shot in 1987. Like ROXANNE, The Orchard showcases the natural beauty of the Kootenay region of British Columbia. But there, of course, is where the similarities end. Whereas ROXANNE was a major Hollywood production with budget, both above the line and production crew, The Orchard was, from the beginning, a no-budget project created and crewed entirely by the two of us, and was actually never intended to be seen, really, by anyone beyond our circle of friends and family. How it ended up scoring film festival laurels from North America and across Europe, and then getting picked up by a major U.S. distributor is, when we reflect back on it, something of an illuminating story involving talent, commitment, good luck, using what you have at hand, and just paying attention to when the universe is giving you gifts and pointers. This segment then is simply what we learned along the way. Hopefully it will be useful to others looking to dive into do-it-yourself film production. It goes without saying, of course, that there are unavoidable givens, starting with having a good script, preferably written by somebody who grew up reading a lot and therefore well attuned to what a story is and how to tell it. This implicates things like genre structure and pacing. That's critical to the kind of film that you have in mind. So if you're not really a reader, except, of course, for Bob McKee's book, best of luck. You also need a working sense of photography, a mental library of important cinematic moments in the history of film to be inspired by, as well as a deep respect for color and sound and how all that happens is interpreted by software and ultimately perceived by an attentive or, worse, inattentive audience. You have to have access to the appropriate visual and audio recording equipment. And finally, it goes without saying that you actually have to have talented actors on some level, as well as musical performers. Color palettes, overall set design, and lighting are, of course, key scene-by-scene and shot-by-shot considerations. But we found that writing out a 2-page manifesto before the first camera was even purchased was critical for keeping the two of us on track during production, especially given our on-the-fly shooting style, when, for example, it was tempting to solve a problem with an artificial light, but then we'd have to check ourselves and find a way to stick to the manifesto's call for available light only, even when the available light was artificial, such as when Lucas drives to the orchard at night to catch what he imagines are people stealing his cherries. In this case, the truck lights alone were the light, and they work beautifully. Same with the opening scene, the grandfather's suicide. Now, we did once or twice break the rule, of course, when there was absolutely no choice, but for the most part, the manifesto ruled, and that helped with overall continuity. It all may sound a little forced and unnecessary extra work, but a manifesto, production plan, key considerations, call it what you will, forces you from the beginning to define what kind of filmmaker you think you are, what you want to achieve, and how the film in general is meant to be seen. Writing to character. In the first segment in the series, Carrie talked about starting The Orchard with a screenplay that was written only after talking to our actors to see what sort of character they might like to play, and then paying attention to how they spoke, their mannerisms, and how they generally fit with the kind of character that we loosely had in mind. This is nothing new, of course. Mike Leigh, for example, has been doing this in his film work for years. But I believe it was central to creating the conditions for the myriad unexpected flashes of brilliance from the actors, some of which literally left us, newbies of course, breathless on set. Such as this scene that we call the dead family sequence, where Lucas needed to shift seamlessly from delusion through fear to deep sorrow. And we got it in one take. Or in Kate Webb's scene where, after some morning sickness, she studies herself at length in the mirror, her primal doubts about her partner sharpening in real time in light of the unexpected pregnancy. It wasn't long, in fact, before we realized the film was already taking on a life of its own, demanding it be so much more than the private little project we had started on a lark. And that by writing to the actors, we were actually writing to a film that in an important sense was already there, in a way that sculpture is sometimes described as simply releasing the final work trapped in a block of stone. Number 4, use what you have at hand. Literally, in the case of the orchard, we had a property that we had recently moved to near Creston, and it had a hobby orchard right here. Our son-in-law, living nearby, had actually lost a finger a few years earlier in a cement pumping accident. The equation couldn't have been simpler. Orchard plus missing finger equals disturbing story possibilities. And that, of course, was just the beginning. Local actors and musicians, business and landowners, the local cinema, the town of Creston, no one that I recall ever said no when we asked if they could help or if they wanted to be part of the production. Well, except for my personal doctor, which forced me, alas, into a small acting role as Dr. Schupnel. Continuing on that vein, number 5 is let the universe guide you. And here we're really just talking about needing to be observant of everything happening around you and letting that impose on the production when and where appropriate. So if you're like us and just wanting to throw your hat in and take the attitude of let's just see what happens, then you're already embracing the fates. And in our experience, good things do and did happen when we left them. This really came home for me when setting up a scene where Lucas makes the fateful decision to buy drugs from his old buddy Hubert. During the setup, it was an incredibly still and beautiful morning, ideal for an uncomplicated scene. 2 hours later, an unprecedented windstorm blew in just before filming, giving rise to difficult recording conditions, and not to mention a veritable stream of cursing and very blue language. When we eventually looked at the footage, hangdog, anticipating a full reshoot, we discovered the wind was actually a perfect metaphor for Lucas's turbulence and inner turmoil. And this happened all throughout production. For example, hitting the high frame rate button by accident on the Blackmagic 6K cinema, a common complaint about this camera, but then realizing the slow-mo effect was actually perfect for the shot. Or the case of leaving the camera running during the forest creature sequence, when Lucas had already walked down a dark path and was turning to come back and left his flashlight on, sweeping the foreground in front of him. And kapow, that ended up being the infinitely better shot. Finally, number 6, a good trailer goes a long way. Getting picked up for distribution was primarily the result of Carrie's excellent trailer cut. And when it came time to approaching possible distributors, I simply started in alphabetical order, and Bayview Entertainment was at the top of the list. I heard back from them in a couple of days and was told the trailer was right on the mark. The rest then fell into place, and we can't say enough about Bayview as a distributor. Indeed, it's because of this fateful connection that we're now in post-production on our second film, with at least 3 in the hopper beyond that, including a film called Hexa, which will be a sequel proper to The Orchard, and then a third film planned also fits into the Creston area story world. In sum, these are just a few of the things we've learned and the insights we've gleaned, and simply throwing a hat into the ring and just giving it all an honest try. It's definitely not a light undertaking, requiring a lot of reading and learning, preparation, talent, and especially perseverance. But remain open to the universe helping you, and you might be amazed at what happens.